Okay, let's. Oh my goodness gracious me! Time creeps on. So we have a nice light topic to finish off with, which should be very easy to go through. Homosexuality, same-sex marriage. Okay, deep breath. Okay, so this bit, a lot of research went into this. I've spoken to a number of people, including a very close friend of mine who is, as of a number of years ago, openly gay. One of my favorite people in the world. Um, he he for some reason thinks I should be the chief rabbi, which I think would be a catastrophic decision and the end of Anglo Jewry as we know it, because I am an irreverent. Yeah, I'm a Hasmo boy. I don't like me authority. Nah, you know. But he's such an amazing person who has done so much for the community, and he is my go-to. Like, how do I understand this? How do you understand? What's your perspective on this? And how do I reconcile it with mine? Okay, the Torah is unequivocal, however. There are certain red lines that we cannot cross, and we'll explore why. Vayikra chapter 18 and 20. A zachar, masculine energy, shall not lie with in the way of lying. Sorry. A zachar you shall. Dear ideas, the Oxford comma's not there. A zachar, comma, you shall not lie with in the way of lying with a woman. It is a to'eva. We'll come back to that Hebrew word in a second. And then in chapter 20, a man who shall lie with a zachar in the way of lying with a woman, they have both done a to'eva. Okay? Now, because time is short, male homosexuality is biblically mentioned. Lesbianism is rabbinic. According to most authorities, there are those who understand it's biblical, which is a more severe level, but the consensus is it is rabbinic for reasons that I hope will shortly become very self-explanatory. Now, this is often, you will often hear, and they're more than within their rights to do so, you will often hear LGBT movements railing against Leviticus 18 and 20. Because you can see this is the source. If there's discrimination, this is going to be the source of it. It's right there, black and white, chapter and verse. The problem, though, that bears us to just take a step back and consider for a second is what happened to Leviticus chapter 19. So 18 sounds horrendous, 20 sounds horrendous, but then when you look at Leviticus 19, I often point out it's probably the most wonderful chapter in the whole Torah. And I've written a brief selection, this is not everything, of the laws discussed in Leviticus 19. Honouring parents, give charity to the poor, be honest in business, ensure workers' rights and pay salaries on time, pursue justice and the equality of law, do not gossip among each other, and, of course, the most famous quote in the Torah, the one line everyone knows apart from the Shema, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbour like yourself. And I once, so in my younger, more outspoken days, I was talking about this in a university, and someone was really giving it to me about Leviticus 18, and I said to them, and they quoted, they said, how can you allow this, that it says in Leviticus 18, it's discriminatory, is it a terrible thing? Doesn't it say in the Torah, you shall love your fellow like yourself? And I went, ding! And I thought, okay, here we go, we got a debate. Now we've got a debate, and I said, you've just quoted me that pasuk, and on the basis of that pasuk, you want to invalidate Leviticus 18. Where's that from? They didn't know, but they knew the verse, love your fellow like yourself. I said, it's the next chapter, which doesn't mean you're wrong, I said to them, but it means that we have to take a deep breath. It's an emotional subject, emotive subject. Take a step back and think 1 second. Is it likely that whoever wrote the Torah was out to get people if the next chapter is socially one of the most wonderful in the whole Torah? Yeah? We can't just cherry pick the bad bits and say, oh, this is disgusting. If you turn the page and it clearly says, love your fellow like yourself. So, let's go into this a little bit. The Gemara says, halachic marriage. So we've discussed marriage, we've discussed the importance of it, and it's an institution, etc. It cannot be performed for any of the forbidden relationships listed in that section of Leviticus. I then wrote the wrong chapter. Oh, the irony. This is what happens when you do things at 3 a.m. Leviticus 18. The marriage is ineffective. So if I were to get a request from a same-sex couple to officiate their marriage, doesn't matter how much I love them, doesn't matter how close I am to them or how long I've known them for, I have to politely decline. Because it is not a marriage. Okay? We're going to skim through all this, then we'll get back to the bigger discussions. Okay, the Sifra, which is an ancient midrashic work, says on Leviticus 18, you shall not follow their norms. This refers to the common practice in the ancient world of same-sex relationships. Okay? Let's identify the word to'eva. To'eva is a word that you'll often hear translated as abomination. Have you heard that translation? We've got the King James Bible to thanks for that. Abomination. It's abominable, right? What does the Gemara say? Bar Kapara said, To'eva is a contraction of three words. To'e ata ba, which means you go astray because of it. So it's not an abomination. It's not good, but it's not an abomination. And we need to explore what this means. You go astray because of it. And I think the final two sources will shed some light on what this straying is. The Chinuch says, the Sefer HaChinuch explains the background ideology of the mitzvah. Again, as I said before, the Rambam says this, we don't fully understand. There's a list of forbidden relationships, as I've just mentioned, in Leviticus 18. They're repeated in Leviticus 20, and that sandwiches 19, which is that beautiful chapter that everyone loves. The Rambam says we don't fully understand. We understand why it's important to have boundaries. We understand why it can't be a free-for-all when it comes to relationships and marriage, and we understand why things like adultery are going to be wrong. We don't fully understand why each of these relationships is forbidden to the extent, I repeat, that the marriage is completely invalid. There's no such thing as a halachic marriage for any of those relationships, among which is same-sex marriage. That's the Rambam. We don't fully understand. But the Chinuch does add a reason which by now I think should be relatively clear. The core of the mitzvah is this. He says in source F, the Almighty desires that we play our part in populating the world, to which end sex is how we accomplish this, and the creative potential of sex should not be wasted, which is the case in same-sex relationships. As such, these relationships are unable to fulfill both the mitzvah of pru'uruvu, which is procreation, and also do not fall under the mitzvah of onah, which we will get to, but that's the Hebrew of, and I don't know if we'll have time fully to explore this, but we've mentioned it already. That is the third of the obligations that a husband has to wife. Number one is food, clothing, and sexual gratification. That's onah, that's the Hebrew word for it. So the Chinuch says these two mitzvot, procreation, the responsibility of continuing the world where Hashem gives us the keys, doesn't apply. And then the second mitzvah of gratification between two people who have emotional knowledge of one another does not apply either. Okay? And then just finally, Rav David Zvi Hoffman, he adds an explanation of this to'eva, that you go astray. This refers to an act that is to be forbidden even if the most enlightened and learned people argue that it has no fault. So I would add my own spin to this, and then we can have a bit more of a discussion to finish off. I would add my own spin to this, which is my understanding, just from a more modern perspective, is a same-sex relationship. And I say this knowing someone really well. We were in school together and we have the same birthday, so we're literally the same age. From his perspective, it's very clear. What the Torah describes as a to'eva, which is translated clumsily as an abomination, but we've identified it means going astray. It's talking about the act. Very important. It's not talking about the people. These aren't abominable people. And we know that. I'm sure we all know a number of people who are absolutely wonderful people, the nicest people you can imagine. Happens to be that they are attracted to the same sex. That's it. So my personal spin, on the to'eh ataba, which Odell meant, to'eh ataba. You go astray. It means something that logically we wouldn't really see a problem with. It's not, as I'd say, it's not as socially destructive as adultery. Yeah? Can I say that? This is very controversial. I'm going to get into trouble for saying this, and it's on camera, but I'll take the flak for it. Adultery, we can instantly say, that will destroy the fabric of society. This is people really hurting each other, cheating on each other, betraying, lack of trust, lack of loyalty. It's horrific. There are other, let's say, sexual encounters in that list where you look at them, as the Rambam says, and you're not quite sure, like, why is that forbidden? So my spin on it is that when it comes to two people in a same-sex relationship, you will be sometimes looking at a relationship that is caring and loving and emotionally close, but There's something that is amiss. That's the to'e'ataba, something that's amiss, which is, I think, what the chinuch is explaining, that the power of procreation or the potential of procreation is absent from that relationship. And therefore, the relationship, to go all the way back to the beginning, which is the family unit that's created in Genesis and that's clearly identified in Genesis, there's something amiss in that family unit, and that's where we're going astray, which means even as Rav David Zvi Hoffman says, even if the most enlightened, it becomes a norm in society, we would still have to draw a line.
Well,
Okay?
very many homosexual couples look after, take on children that have a worse home, no chance of a good life anywhere else, one thing, so that's kind of, I know they didn't create the children,
Correct.
they gave them a life. And the other is that sometimes, say, in lesbian relationships, those women find a way, to get pregnant. They have donor sperm, so they still do create. Okay, not in that couple, but also I wanted to say something about your about the F paragraph, saying about the creative potential being wasted and that being a problem.
Yes.
But the way that it works is that millions of seed are wasted every time.
Yes.
Either because
Yes.
the wife does not get pregnant, or because only one seed succeeds.
Correct.
So.
Or she is pregnant.
Or she is. So.
Or they're using birth control.
So
which is discussed and permitted.
Being wasteful.
Correct.
Shouldn't be a huge issue.
Correct. So, as in, good question. With this, we bear in mind there are two layers. One is that more mystical layer of Zachar and Nekeva. Remember that? There's two layers to that family unit. Number one is that for reasons we may not fully fathom, we've explored some of them in the fourth class, which is the gender class, but I don't fully fathom them, is that Hashem has said masculine energy, feminine energy, male and female, that's the family unit. Okay, that is the unit through which marriage, or the family institution through marriage, is created. That's one. That already excludes, for again reasons we don't fully understand, male and male. It's male and female specifically. Second question is, and it's tied into this question as well, which is that I mentioned before, there are two mitzvahs. And it's the second one. This is why I think it's important that the same source F, yes, the Chinuch mentions, which is the Onah. That's the gratification. That's the part, and we might as well be blunt about it, that's the part where the Torah says that sex should be enjoyable. It should be. But make sure it says to the husband that, this isn't all about you. We've got to make sure that the wife is gratified as well. As far as I understand from the research that I've done over the last quite a few weeks, is that there is a fundamental difference between, put it this way, once the institution of marriage or the relationship itself is sanctioned and sanctified, which is male and female, there is a potential within that relationship of procreation. I think that's indisputable. Does it happen all the time? No, that would be ridiculous, right? Classic example is if wife is pregnant, she's not going to fall pregnant again, so what, you abstain for 9 months? No, clearly not. There's absolutely no obligation whatsoever. Continue as you were. But then one second, what about so what seems to be clear is once you have established a potential, a broad potential, this is a relationship within which procreation is possible, that then opens the door for the second mitzvah, which is general physical intimacy. That may not always lead to, as you've identified correctly, actual child birth. Okay? The problem, therefore, is at level one. What do we do with a relationship where inherently there cannot ever be procreation? Now, raising children is a very separate question, because I think, Susie, a deeper question to ask is, so, well, then what are we asking? What is being asked of homosexual partners? What are they meant to do? Like, how are they meant to be good Jews? Yeah, that's, I think, a really important question. And the answer is a hell of a lot. Or a hell of a lot. And it's a challenge that, and I've spoken to my friend about this, and he doesn't like me saying this, but I'm like, I say to him, you know, you used to be, I'll be the chief rabbi. I was like, you're one of the most righteous people I know because of what you're facing and grappling with and how you're reconciling that with still living your life as a proud Jew who isn't just a proud Jew, but who contributes actively. I won't say too much, you'll probably work out who it is. He's quite prominent, who contributes actively through various charities, Jewish charities, to the fabric of that. This is an amazing person. The reality is the Torah is requesting celibacy. As I said, it's not a small thing. It's an unimaginable challenge, which doesn't mean, of course, that can two men live together? Yes. Could they adopt children and give them a better life? Yes. Would we celebrate that to an extent? I think so, yeah. Because they're giving those children, you know, a better life. With regards to celibacy, this becomes a more delicate conversation, does it not? Because what people do in privacy of their own home, you know, if I was approached directly and asked a question by a friend or otherwise, which is, I've met someone, I really like them, can we take it to the next level, as it were? I would have to say, I'm afraid, please try not to. That's going to be really tough, really, really tough. I can't even imagine what that is to go through that. So it's rich for me to say it, but I have to say it. Try not to. If they then go, you know, it's the same, more or less, as someone coming to me and saying, when I go on holiday, can we eat out at the local restaurant so I can sample the... I've been asked this question. Can we sample that? I'm flying all the way there. It's true. It's a good question. I'm paying thousands of pounds, flying all the way there, never going to go there again. Can we sample the local cuisine? And they asked me that. I'm like, no.
What do you want me to say?
You know, you don't leave kosher at passport control. It's still kosher.
What if it's a kazayas?
Kazayas of shellfish. You know.
It's all right.
So I tell them, no, you can't. But when they go, I'm not following them there. I wouldn't mind if they flew me out, but I'm not following them.
People ask.
Yeah, hopefully they'll keep to it. You know, there's sometimes, honestly, Odell, sometimes there's a married couple and one side of the couple is more concerned than the other, and they're asking me. I know that my partner is going to drag me to, you know, he or she has already mapped out the restaurants they want to go to sample all this stuff. When I go there, because I'm not sit outside, what can I eat when I'm there? Okay, so these are the sorts of questions that come up. But what you're doing privately, that is a separate consideration. That's between you and Hashem, you know.
But those same-sex couples, so they're not doing a mitzvah because they're not getting married to the other, you know, sex, and
Yes.
not having children that way. They're not doing the mitzvah, but then you could say they're not doing anything wrong. They're going away from the way, but they're not.
The Torah says clearly that in the act itself, the attraction,
The act, but
the
it says
attraction.
they're veering off the way, but they're not saying avera.
That's Leviticus 20. Leviticus 20 is the 18 is the forbidden relations, 20 is the severity of it, and it puts them all on equal severity. Now again, that may be for different reasons or for reasons we don't fully understand, but when it comes to same-sex, actual sex, we have a reason we can understand about why it would be forbidden to such an extreme level. But again, the attraction is not forbidden. We don't, as far as I know, believe in conversion therapy. We believe this is the way the person is. This is who they are. We're not going to try and force them to be someone else. It's been proven to be, in many cases, an absolute disaster and tears lives to shreds. This is a challenge they've been given. There are many people, you know, who are given. This has come up in many conversations I've had with my friend and with others, with Dayanim, with Rabbanim, is there are people who live their entire lives with extremely difficult challenges. You know, people who, God forbid, have a disability and they're aware of it. They're cognizant of how they are different to other people. It's very hard to navigate, especially in a school where they look around and no one else is like them. Or a person who lives, for example, their whole life in dire poverty. Their whole life. Like, it's really, sometimes, this is why I did this after suffering, yeah? It is true. Sometimes we're given really difficult tests. So what's clear is the Torah forbids it. I think what's almost as clear is why it might have forbidden it. I think we can understand what's missing from that relationship. The attraction is not forbidden. The relationship, as in platonic, is not forbidden. Consummating it is the problem. And that act is what's called the to'eva, the abomination of don't take it to that level. And I think part of this, if I may add, and then Carl, I think you had a question. Remember I said there was a source that I put in the wrong place?
That was
yeah.
mine.
Yeah,
I just
so
wanted
it's,
to remind you that.
thank you. Source E in section B, which is often misquoted, forgive me for saying it a little bit harshly, it's often misused by the LGBT community to come to a conclusion that I think there's no grounds to come to. The book of Shmuel base says, this is after Sir King David. So King David had, King Saul was the first king of Israel. When he found out that King David was going to succeed him and not his own son, Jonathan, he wanted to kill King David. He wasn't yet the king. However, King David and Saul's son, Jonathan, were best friends. In fact, says the Pasuk, they were such good friends that when David heard that Jonathan had been killed in battle, he lamented for him. He composed a whole poem for him, grieving his loss. And he says, I grieve for you, my brother Jonathan. You were most dear to me. Your love was more wondrous to me than the love of women. From which certain people come to a conclusion and say, oh, King David was gay. Which is a bit of a leap. He's lamenting his friend, but it's a leap that I understand, okay? And this is, I think, why I put it in this part of the talk, but it doesn't really belong there, is that, yes, if we live in a society where expression of love is synonymous with sex, then yeah, when you see it says it there, that I love him more than women, our Western brains here, I am attracted to him, sexually attracted to him more than I am to women. QED, King David was gay. Yeah? It's coming from a Western reading of this verse. In Judaism, love and sex are totally separate things. You can have the closest relationship and the deepest love with someone without any sort of physical intimacy whatsoever. Yeah? I mean, is this not the case for siblings? Hopefully, right? You know, unless it gets to all sorts of places we don't want it to get to, yeah? Parents and children, we understand this. But we live in a society where, forgive me for speaking a bit crassly, but in society since the 60s, which has sort of invaded popular culture, what's a byword for sex? To make love. And you're like, wait a minute, hold on there, why don't you just do that? That's not true. Love is there, physical intimacy is there. Different hemispheres. They are not coexistent. They can exist separately. Yeah? Carl,
No,
you wanted to bring that back to my attention.
yeah, that was it.
Well, what about if you have someone who meets their same-sex partner when they are they're past procreation? Like it's not possible anymore for them. Well,
In the
women.
60s.
Yeah. So there would be no spinning of anything or a problem because they've already
I
procreated.
don't know enough about male biology.
I'm thinking more like women, and obviously more men. I think can
Maybe
keep
then
going.
getting married is just, it's not to create kids, and then it goes into the second one that he just has to, love her and provide for her.
Are you
Under the
Sally
marriage.
speaking about lesbianism
Yeah.
or?
Yeah.
So again, I think this is also, I think, an insight into why lesbianism is seen by most authorities as rabbinic. It's rabbinically a problem, and it would seem, from what I understand, that the problem is coming more from the hemisphere, more from the sphere of mimicking the culture around you, as it were.
It's not going.
But there's no issue. Correct. There's no issue
It was
there.
never going to be possible.
Correct. There's no issue there of
But
the
you can say
wasted
that to
potential.
also
Yeah.
older people who get married. If you get married in your 50s, 60s, no, not same sex, regular.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're also not doing any.
Yes.
It's not
Yeah.
mitzvah to get married. Like, can you live
Yes,
with him
correct.
without getting married?
No, this is also some massive. This is a whole
Because
discussion
they're not
when it
having
comes
kids
to
anymore.
so God forbid, couples who are even younger couples who have fertility problems. This is a very, very complicated question that is discussed at length of what is the difference. There are certain differences that are clear. Difference number one is that whereas one is explicitly stated in the Torah, do not do, the other one is not explicit. One clearly falls under a category where there's no such thing as marriage. The other one, there's no indication that it was ever excluded from the institution of marriage. But there's still the same question in philosophy, which is, if a couple, God forbid, has fertility problems, what are they meant to do? And there are several very important differences, which, if you want to, we can go into, about why it's still different to a same-sex marriage, man and man. But yeah, it's not. These are very carefully considered questions about how we end up in a different place for those two scenarios. Happy to talk a bit further afterwards. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of shunning of a gay man in the service and what they're allowed to do?
Good
how
question.
Does that manifest itself
That's a
in
good
the
question.
community?
That's the one that I've been going backwards and forwards with some of my colleagues and Dayanim, and also with a few friends about what their experience has been. In the same vein as we wouldn't, for example, wish Mazal Tov to a family who's intermarried. That's the US policy, and I think this is the halakhically correct thing to do. It doesn't mean that we treat them badly or don't talk to them, but we don't celebrate that. So I think, yes, a same-sex couple who marry, we wouldn't congratulate them publicly. Can they be barred from the shul service? Excellent question, because a same-sex couple will go, well, you're giving aliyahs, you're calling up people who drove to shul, yeah, and they were going to drive home and have a full English. So, yeah, they're right. That in itself is a whole discussion, which is, well, how is it that you're able to call people up who don't...
Because it's private, they're doing it in private.
But it's often not.
It's not.
And Ordell, the sensitivity of it is that when you call someone up to the Torah, they're saying the blessing, Asher b'chabanim mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torah, who chose us from the nations, who gave us the Torah, and they don't keep any of it. It's a bit rude. It's a bit insensitive. So there's, again, a whole discussion. For me, from my perspective, one has to be consistent, which means that personally, here in Stanmore, every shul is different. Here in Stanmore, I've asked the wardens to not call people up who very publicly do not keep Shabbos. Okay? Now, there are rabbis out there who are not as extreme as I am on that. We had a situation not so long ago of someone who was called up who is on national television every Saturday, and I wasn't happy about it. Now, he's a lovely man. He's a lovely man who does a lot for the community, but I wasn't so happy about it because I was like, come on, he's.
Do you ever had complaints like those people that you haven't called realize that they're not?
Yeah, it's really tough, 100%. Yeah, and if they pick up on it,
then what would you say?
That's when I have to, put my. I'm not here to win friends. I'd love to, but I'm not here to make enemies either. But you have to sometimes draw a line. Or this was the Reform Orthodox. We're not a popularity contest. We're here to pursue what we believe is truth. And if someone lives a life where they're publicly flouting and gaining tremendously from not keeping the Torah, to then honour them in front of the community looks like we are condoning that. So we have to be very careful. Now, how would that apply to a same-sex couple? I say this very carefully. If they chose to get married civilly, a civil marriage, with a respectful recognition that we're not going to pursue a form of halachic marriage, I would have a tremendous amount of respect for that, because that shows a deference, it shows we understand that we're not trying to conform the Torah to our lifestyle, we're trying to conform our lifestyle to the Torah. I'd have to think carefully about a couple who had, had a what looks like a halachic marriage, a same-sex marriage under a chuppah with someone officiating and a talit and whatever, and making the brachas. I'd have to think about it. But again, there are shuls where they wouldn't draw the line there either. But what's clear that some, unfortunately, communities are falling afoul of is it's not consistent. So they will shun same-sex couples, but then will gladly call up everyone else, and that I disagree with. It has to be consistent.
Taking up marriage and couples.
Yeah.
Just a gay man. And no issues?
None.
Can...
None.
Yeah. Okay.
None. None. And I know it's rich for me to say it, and probably selfish for me to say it, but for me, the ideal for a gay man or a gay couple, lesbian, whatever it is continue keeping the Torah, continue keeping the mitzvot. What you do in your private life is between you and Hashem. If that crosses the boundary into shul where it becomes a public issue, we'll discuss that individual or case by case basis. But I would beg them, don't see this challenge as a nullification of all of Judaism, which it can be because it's such a crushingly desperate challenge to be in. When we're essentially, as I said, we're requesting celibacy. That's it's a lo davar katan, as we say in Israel. That's not a small thing. That's asking a lot of someone.
In Israel,
Yeah.
they have a lot. It's very popular. I mean,
What's very popular?
Celibacy.
no, I'm saying a lot of gay
Oh.
marriage couples with kids together, and
Yeah.
it's a big
And
issue.
look at it,
I mean,
it's
not
coming
big
it's
issue,
coming
but
from a
it's
good
not
place. It's not coming
highlighted.
from an evil
Here,
place.
you don't
Like
see it so
they
much.
they want a chuppah, they want to do the right thing, they want to they're Jewish, they want to express their marriage Jewish. I get that, I get it.
They
It has to
probably
be.
resent being asked, how dare I be asked to be celibate? Why nobody else is asked to be celibate? Why should I be celibate?
100%, yeah, 100%, and I would totally understand and try to sympathise with that resentment, but as I observed before, it is not the only area of challenge that is all-encompassing, life-consuming. There are many people who live with challenges that
Yeah.
their
People
entire
who are
life.
disabled and can't get married
Yeah.
for certain reasons. It also,
Yeah.
very sad.
And now we're back to
But
the
they won't
suffering
like
talk again.
us thinking of them as disabled or misfortunate because they're gay.
No.
It's a bit like a
And it doesn't, to frame it as, look, as again, as we did when we did the suffering talk, that within every challenge is a potential to, by overcoming that challenge, to bring a tremendous amount of light and holiness into this world. It doesn't work to have that. It can for
So why
some.
do you know so many gay people then? If God has created people
Mhm.
in His image,
Yep.
and you've got a good proportion of people who are,
Because
I would say
of
10%, but I don't know. It's not 1%. It's a good percent of people who are gay.
Yeah.
How is that? Because if people are created in His image,
Yeah.
it's a positive. You know?
Being created in Hashem's image, with the way we understand that verse, is that we are created with the ability to choose independent. We can do, as He does what He wants, we
You
can
don't
essentially do.
choose being gay or not like that.
But you choose to act on it or not. And is that an easy thing to choose? No. That's really difficult. But I have heard it explained as well, Talia, that there's, yes, we're created in Hashem's image, we have the ability to choose one way or the other. I'd say it's probably the case, Carl backed me up, that most men are attracted to many women. Naturally, like they
And they have
can't
to choose
really
only two.
can't really help that.
Only two.
They're
Not
No, but since the institution, since the Rabbeinu Gershom, and it's now completely
You gotta-
normative that you only marry one, that's it.
Down.
You got to also make a choice. Like, do I act on that impulse or do I not? Now, of course, the difference there is that a heterosexual man in Jewish law has an avenue of expression sexually, which is his wife, whereas, again, we're requesting from someone who is homosexual to not have any avenue of that physical expression. Of course, that's an enormous thing to ask. Of course, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so I think it was Talia, Susie. I think if we go back to, as I said, we're going to go back to that question, comparing the issue we've identified with same-sex marriage, and particularly with the act of sex itself, compared to, which was a great question, compared to older couples that are experiencing fertility problems. So I think we've elaborated that there are two layers here. There are always two layers at work. To repeat again, the one is that the family unit described in the Torah is Zachar and Nekeva, which we've identified already as the union of male and female. And again, as I've said, at least to the best of my knowledge, which isn't much, I know that's not claiming much, I don't fully understand why. We've explored some avenues when we did the gender class, but we don't fully understand why it is at the very beginning of the whole Torah, that's what's described as the ideal family unit. Does that mean that other types of family units can't be built on love and on loyalty and on dedication, devotion to one another, and on phenomenal accomplishments and achievements in this world, materially and spiritually. Of course, it doesn't exclude that. Of course, we understand that other types of family units will be built from those same ingredients. We don't fully understand maybe the metaphysical or the spiritual ramifications of those differences. What we do understand is very clear, unequivocally clear, chapter and verse in Genesis, is that is the way that Hashem has blessed the world to be the family unit. So that's already sort of strata number one. And then number two, which is where the question comes in, which is if it seems to be, which is the suggestion of a number of the early sort of medieval authorities, and earlier than that still in the Midrash as well, as we explored, that it's alluded to as well, that the problem is that procreation is lacking inherently from this relationship. So then we've identified a very good question, which is what about couples who, God forbid, are experiencing a fertility issues? Like, what does that mean for them? So there are a number of significant differences that I said before we would discuss if we have time. So this is a bit of like an appendix to what we've already discussed. And that is that in no specific order, again, already there's a difference between the combination, the union of male and female is present for a heterosexual couple who also happen to experience fertility problems. That's already difference number one. But let's look at more practical, understandable differences that may have ramifications in halacha, in Jewish law, that therefore manifest as differences in the reality with which we view these two situations or scenarios. Excuse me. Okay. So difference number one is, it would seem to be, for the best of my knowledge and to the best of my research, that the overwhelming majority of couples who experience fertility issues, the overwhelming majority, as far as I know, are unaware at the time of marriage. So they marry what's called beheter. They marry with complete permission. It's completely fine. When they get married, they are blissfully unaware of, God forbid, the challenges and trials that are going to face them further down the line when they try for children. It's a very, very painful thing to have to consider, but the initial marriage itself was done without any awareness whatsoever of fertility problems. So again, that's already difference number one, in that step one of the relationship, which is the marriage itself, was completely fine. It was permitted. There was nothing wrong with it whatsoever. Now you might ask, well, should we therefore insist halachically to subject every single person before they get married to a fertility test? Should we invest probably billions, not just millions, billions of pounds with the top medicine available to us to enable people to test before they get married? Again, this question is a good question of should people check their compatibility in fertility before getting married. The answer is they don't have to, because in halacha there is a principle that we follow the rov. That doesn't mean the rabbi, that's the Rav, yeah. We follow the majority. And this manifests in hundreds, if not thousands of places, halachically, where we are called upon and expected to follow the majority, the status quo, as it were. So if, as it is the case, that the overwhelming majority of people, thank God, do not experience many, if any, fertility issues at all throughout their married life, we are halachically allowed to assume that everyone is a member of or falls into that majority category. So everyone falls into the majority category of being fertile and being able to procreate, which means we are not forced or compelled, and nothing compels us whatsoever to turn to a young engaged couple and say, actually, before you get married, we need to test you to see you're actually fertile. We don't do that whatsoever. So again, a heterosexual couple who get married, they get married beheter, it's completely permissible. They are usually completely unaware of any issues that they may encounter further down the line. Now, the question then becomes, so then what if, when, God forbid, that time comes, they try for children and realize this isn't working, and there is some sort of biological or medical problem that needs to be addressed? How do we halachically respond to that? Now, there's already a clear difference, which is they are married, and their marriage was sanctioned, and it was sanctified, and it was condoned, and it was celebrated, because at the time, again, heterosexual couple, we had no idea there was any issue whatsoever, nor would we test to see, as I've explained, if there was any issue whatsoever. They've now been living together for many years. They've, we hope, developed a very close emotional bond to one another, and again, that idea of devek is probably the glue that binds them, we would hope, on the contrary, is even stronger now than it was then, that they've stuck through this together and they've faced this very difficult, highly emotional, highly painful challenge together of trying unsuccessfully to have children. They've stood at that vanguard together and they've fought side by side and supported each other emotionally side by side for many years. So we think, on the contrary, their closeness is even stronger than it was when they first got married. So to turn to such a couple and say, well, unfortunately, you're going to have to separate, is ludicrous. That's an act of absolute cruelty. Because again, their marriage was permissible to begin with. They've been living together, blissfully unaware for many years. We do not force a couple to separate just because they're experiencing fertility problems. That would be an outrageously cruel thing to do. Okay, so that's difference number one. Difference number two, and then we'll get to a third difference that I think, Susie, gets back to your question about the shunning people or excluding them in some way from communal activity or from mitzvot in shul, things like that. We'll get back to that in a second. But difference number two, when it comes to a couple who are, again, God forbid, experiencing fertility challenges and difficulties, is whereas, thank God, we live in a sort of segue of time and space where, with modern technology and developments in modern medicine, we are seeing breakthroughs on an almost weekly basis in fertility treatment, where solutions are being found to all manner of problems that enable couples who, even just a few years ago, there was no hope of them ever falling pregnant and having children, are now able to enjoy that same blessing. So we're looking at a fundamentally different scenario here, in that a heterosexual couple who are experiencing fertility problems, there is a strong and growing chance that they will find a solution medically. They'll find a medical solution to that problem that will enable them to therefore fulfill the mitzvah of pru'u'revu, of procreation. As far as we understand, even with all the advances we've made in modern science, a homosexual relationship, when it comes to the question of procreation, there isn't a single inkling of a suggestion that we may find some sort of medical, biological solution to enable procreation between two men. That is, I'm sorry for saying it crudely and bluntly, but that is, again, a fundamental difference as to why we treat more leniently a heterosexual couple who are experiencing fertility problems, because our belief is that those problems might not last forever and there may be solutions to them. There is a lot more to discuss on this. It was raised earlier, the question about adoption. We don't have time to discuss. Another fascinating, very beautiful discussion is had about couples who adopt and what that means vis-a-vis the mitzvah of settling the earth and filling the earth and creating the next generation, etc., and taking the responsibility from Hashem and bringing it into the next generation. It's a wonderful discussion, but we've said more than enough already about the topics we've got at hand. Maybe series 7, we'll do another series. So those are two differences already. A third difference for us to consider, which I think again speaks to the, it's not actually so much of a difference in this specifically, but I would like to come back to the question that Susie raised earlier, and just to offer one final word about excluding or shunning in any way a same-sex couple from shul life. And again, to make unequivocally clear, there has to be consistency, and wherever, I'm going to say it bluntly and I might get into trouble for saying it, if you step into a shul and you notice that people who clearly violate other areas of the Torah, classic examples being Shabbat observance and keeping kosher, those are the classic ones. If you go into a shul and you notice that the owner of a non-kosher restaurant, which is also open on Shabbos, gets called up to the Torah, but that same shul won't give a call up to the Torah, so someone who's in a same-sex marriage, that is hypocrisy. It's as simple as that, and I go so far as to say, and maybe I'll get in severe trouble for saying this on camera, but what you're looking at is probably an undercurrent of homophobia. It's very simple. You cannot maintain a double standard where some are clearly welcomed in with open arms, and not just open arms, but they're given what we call kibudim, they're given honors in shul, they're called up to the Torah and things like that. You can't have one rule for one and one rule for another. You have to keep it consistent. So, for example, in the most Haredi of shuls, you might go into them. In fact, they're actually, many of them, very, very tolerant of people in same-sex marriages, and are less tolerant, perhaps, sometimes, of those who maybe own a shop that's open on Shabbos or a restaurant that sells non-kosher food. But the golden rule is to be consistent. And wherever the shul maintains its standards, those standards must be universal. They must apply to everyone. They cannot have a situation that is hypocritical, because it is likely based on some sort of, old medieval homophobia or even modern homophobia, that for some reason we feel uncomfortable treating a same-sex couple in one way, but we're fine treating everyone else with that exact same standard in a different way. So hopefully that makes things clear. To give a little bit more of a background about why some shuls may draw a line, I mentioned earlier, some shuls may make a decision to draw a line if a same-sex couple has sort of got married with a Jewish marriage, with a chuppah. The idea that's given about why I said before, why is it okay ever to, for example, I'm using it as an example because it's the most common one, and it's the most common one where there are battles being fought. Why is it such a big deal, or what is the problem with calling someone up who doesn't keep Shabbat? Which is often the case. How are we able to do such a thing if, as I've pointed out, there's a certain sort of contradiction in terms there, where you call someone up to the Torah who makes the blessing on the Torah on behalf of the congregation, but doesn't keep anything the Torah says? It seems a little bit untoward, isn't it? It's not even ironic. It's worse. It's almost like a slap in the face of Judaism. So how are we able to do that? The general approach, as far as I've seen, to the best of my knowledge that's given in the various halachic authorities, is that we call people up to the Torah because by giving them that honor, and by, on the contrary, not shunning them and not ostracizing them, and not giving them the cold shoulder from the community, but by keeping them involved, our hope is that from having a positive, uplifting experience in an Orthodox shul, they will one day come to a decision and say, you know what, I'm going to actually start keeping Shabbat to a greater level. They might not keep it 100%, but they might say, you know what, I'm going to close the shop on Shabbos. I'm going to drive to shul still, but I'm going to close the shop. That's already a massive step for that person. So the hope is, or someone says, you know what, I'm not going to keep, fully kosher. I'm going to eat out, a lot of people do. I'm going to eat out vegan or vegetarian, but I'm going to keep a kosher home. I'm going to make sure my kitchen in my house is fully kosher. That is a massive step. So the hope is that by bringing someone into the community and they have a positive, warm experience, it will rub off on them, and they will then make certain changes to their Jewish lifestyle. That is the hope that is given, which is, again, a question that's asked, which is, would that therefore be an unrealistic expectation for a couple who've got married? Because, of course, the solution, as it were, would be for them to separate. The same-sex couple, would be for them to make a decision to separate and be celibate. Again, we recognize that is asking a tremendous amount from those people. And we recognize, and indeed have a deep respect for the challenge that they face and the decisions they have to make, and the weight that they carry on their shoulders the moment they walk in through that door of the shul, that they should not feel judged. They should not feel, as I've said before, and I want to re-emphasize it, they should not feel that they are the to'eva, this word that we can sometimes see translated as abominable. They should not see themselves as abominable. They should, however, understand that the act itself is a serious problem, but they themselves, we recognize, are often doing that act from a place of love and from a place of connection and from a place of emotional attachment, but we still have to draw a line halachically from the Orthodox perspective and say we would never condone that act, and we can never sanctify that marriage. And that line can never be crossed, because the moment it is crossed, although we may be tempted to cross it because it seems that it is the nice thing to do, and certainly would be the popular thing to do, as I said before, we're here to pursue what we believe is truth, and we're here to defend and represent Hashem's word in this world, and to the best of our knowledge and understanding, the clearest and simplest interpretation of the source material indicates that those two red lines can never be crossed. And what I would add to that is that I've certainly seen this firsthand in my own experience over the years, is that one of the great challenges that I face as a rabbi of an Orthodox shul is that I often have conversations with members of the LGBT community who are wonderful, lovely people, but approach specifically the subject of sex from a very Western perspective. I've sat and met with people who've said to me to my face, like, Rabbi, get over it, it's just sex. They've said that. They've said, like, what's the big deal? And, you know, I've kind of tried to politely demonstrate to them that that's one perspective, to say it's just, well, what is it? It's just a big deal. It's an act of mutual pleasure between two consenting adults, or it's an act of expression of love between two consenting adults. And I've had to sometimes push back very gently and say, on the contrary, we live in a society in which sex has been cheapened so much that it's not seen as a big deal. It's almost the same as putting on a coat. There's nothing to it whatsoever. If I like the coat, I'll put the coat on. If I like that person, sleep with that person. It's the same decision-making process. But again, we recognize that in Judaism, it is a very, very big deal. In fact, we might say it's the biggest deal of them all. It's the first blessing, as it were, that Hashem gives to humanity. He's already given, by the way, a blessing to creation, which we know as Shabbos. So he blesses creation at the advent of the first Shabbat of creation, of existence itself. But his first blessing to humanity is to procreate. And we've said already, and I'm emphasizing it one last time, is that it's not only a big deal, it's probably the biggest deal of them all, because it's the act through which we don't just emulate our Creator, we become creators ourselves, and we are entrusted and empowered by the Almighty to perform that task and that privilege. So it is sometimes difficult to diffuse a conversation when speaking to someone who is coming, again, from a very good place, a very noble place, a very well-meaning place. But again, there's that to'eh ataba, there's that slightly gone, that's something slightly amiss there that is often has been seeped into one's way of thinking through a Western viewpoint, which sees sex as a completely, means absolutely nothing anymore. And yeah, from a Western perspective, you're right, it's not a big deal, but from a Jewish perspective, it is the biggest deal of them all. So I hope that gives a helpful overview of some of the differences there are between same-sex couples and heterosexual couples who are experiencing fertility issues. I hope, again, we've made unequivocally clear the consistency and the decency with which we or any other Orthodox community has to treat same-sex couples. There cannot be hypocrisy, and if you do see double standards, we should call that out as homophobia, because there is no place for it. But with that all said, again, there are two red lines that, as much as it may pain us, and as much as we may not fully understand why those red lines are there, we do understand them, I think, enough, if not more than enough, to respect and to stand our ground and say, with the most sincere apologies and with, again, the most heartfelt of love and sympathy for a challenge that is all-encompassing and that lasts for the duration of a lifetime, to say the red line of sex itself and the red line of sanctifying and condoning the marriage cannot, unfortunately, be crossed. We believe in our pursuit of truth that those two lines are true, and they are real and represent the Almighty's will, which we may not understand fully, we may never understand it fully, but that doesn't change our duty to represent it to the best of our abilities. I hope that's all clear. Thank you so much for joining. See you next week.